Let's start with the first question. When is the trade deadline? And then how much activity do you anticipate?
Yeah, so the trade deadline is Tuesday, Halloween, October 31st. Every deal's got to be done before 4 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes we get some buzzer beaters we don't hear about until 4:05, but they obviously, are consummated by the teams before that. But unfortunately, after last year, we had 10 trades the week before the deadline. We had some blockbusters with, Bradley Chubb and Christian McCaffrey and, big TJ Hawkinson, etc. I thought we might get the same thing. There was a clear delineation between the good teams and the bad teams. I think with all the 1 in 5 teams, I think went 4-1 this past weekend. Then you had Minnesota beat San Francisco. I don't think it's going to be super active. The big names I'm keeping an eye on still are the guys in Washington. One of those 2 edge defenders. I do think one of them is going to get moved. And then I guess Derrick Henry in Tennessee maybe. But I think that the results Sunday are going to matter in a lot of games.
Okay. So how many teams do you anticipate being sellers effectively at the trade deadline?
Tennessee probably still the biggest one. We obviously know already Kevin Byard, like you said, has moved. The Washington thing is just a unique circumstance where they cannot retain both players because of 1 franchise tag, 2 pending free agents. So I don't know if I'd call them a seller overall. I think it's just a unique situation where you'd be dumb not to get more than a compensatory pick. And then the rest I think will be smaller, but if the Giants lose, they move like a Paris Campbell. If Minnesota loses, do they make a smaller move? I still don't really buy it. I think that win kind of changed everything. And if they win and are 500 and 2-0 in their division, I don't think they're selling anything.
Right.
Who else is bad? Chicago, I don't think is going to sell.
Does Carolina get involved in shipping off Brian Burns because they stink and he's their first round pick if they want one?
They probably should, but I don't think they're going to. The sense I get is he's going to stick around. They'll try to continue to find a way to work out an extension after placing the franchise tag is my guess. I think there was a report from someone like they're not going to trade him. I haven't heard that personally, but it's kind of the sense I get as well. But yeah, and then it gets smaller. But I do think all of these competitive teams, I don't think Philly is done. I don't think San Francisco can be ruled out for making a move. They've cleared a ton of cap space for more for carryover, but I think they would be open to making a move. Cleveland and Baltimore, all these running back injuries. Are they the Henry teams? Are they in the Dalvin Cook market potentially? I think is interesting. So yeah, it's just when I say there's gonna be not movement, I think there'd be smaller moves, but the 2 guys I mentioned are, 3, I guess, with Washington being a duo, maybe DeAndre Hopkins, in Tennessee. But I think the rest is going to be your Terrace Marshalls, your Paris Campbells, your Hunter Renfros, your Carl Lawsons. Good players, sure. But, I wouldn't characterize those as blockbusters if they do happen.
In a general sense, are these trades driven by the buying teams or the selling teams? Or is there just no generalization to be made? It feels like actually we tend to frame this in terms of, these bad teams are now, it's a fire sale, right? For sale sign on the front lawn. We're getting rid of everything with value. We're shipping off anybody. We're getting draft picks. We're getting rid of cap space. But actually, it's more a case of a team that has a weakness or has lost a guy to injury or has a space for something or, there's an obvious potential area. Those guys are out shopping, right? They're looking for a player that could come in and potentially fix a problem spot or give them some depth in an area that's now an issue, or potentially a team that is better than they thought they were going to be and needs to sort of cement that over the course of the season. Is that the right dynamic, or is it just case by case? It's random.
It is case by case, but I would lean more towards sellers making it clear a guy is available again. And there's always this kind of everyone freaks out. Are they shopping him or are they just answering the phone? There's always kind of silly, jargon of what exactly is happening. But I would say it's more seller driven. I even mentioned Denver. Obviously, I think it's clear one of those receivers could be on the move as well. Maybe Josie Jewell at linebacker. I don't think Patrick Surtain gets moved. I feel like Justin Simmons was maybe a Philadelphia candidate. I don't know who else needs a great safety in his caliber. Garrett Bowles keeps getting mentioned, but he's a very good tackle. 31 years old. I don't know why you would trade that piece. I know he's mentioned some frustration, but I would say it's more seller driven. I would, but again, like, I think that we hear the word shopping and we think that teams are like, hey, please take this guy off our hands.
Right.
That's not what it is. It's like, hey, if you wanted him, if you're interested, we could find a middle ground and part ways with this player.
This is all like it's all sort of regulated. There's no system for this, right? It's just sort of teams putting it out there. Like, I feel like the NFL is kind of missing a trick here. We could create a thing around this. We could have like a designation, right? This guy is on the transfer list. This guy is on the we're open to phone calls list. This guy is on the not in a million years forget about it list, right? Let's start putting these guys in actual firm, designated, publicly available buckets and create like a whole drama around this thing.
I would say, as fun as that is, and it sounds like a fantasy thing where you throw on like on my trade block.
Right.
I'll say this too, and it ties into, not to get on a soapbox, but like all the rumor accounts that just pump out absolute garbage. Like it gets into buildings, and these GMs have to like talk to players and be like, hey, I won't name one of the many that you all know who I'm referring to. Is this report actually real? Are you guys they have to say no, like. And it causes serious problems, and they have to manage these relationships that, yeah, it's part of their job, but it's derived from absolutely nothing in reality. So I think that's probably more what it speaks to, is if a player caught wind that he was on the hey, I'm available list, he'd probably get pretty pissed off, which I think is understandable. So yeah, that's why I think that wouldn't be a thing. But I get it. Yeah, like you said, transfer portal type approach. In theory, I don't hate the idea.
It kind of feels though that we're already there. Like they're already fighting these fires that may not even exist because of these accounts you're talking about and because of the rumor mill and everything. Like people assume it's happening anyway, and if they assume it's happening, they're probably talking about it and reporting it, which means it's getting back to them. Now, the only thing they have in their favor at the moment is the plausible deniability and being able to lie. Like say, no, you're not on the trade block. We're not listening to phone calls. If you'll excuse me, I have call waiting on the other line, but it's not relevant to you. Don't worry about it, right? Like that goes out the window if you actually do formalize the system and he's right there on the list saying, I'm listening to phone calls for you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would just say, and every building is, of course, different. But my perception, again, I'm not, when you see all these various accounts, I think if you don't know a top 3 person in a building, so that's GM, assistant GM, and maybe head coach in some cases or whatever, odds are you're not even getting correct information. So it's like these random dudes that have hashtag sources and know these things and know these trades are close and yada yada. Hey, credit to them. Maybe they know some GM somehow, some way. I'm a little skeptical that's the case.
All right, let's talk about some of the biggest names and where they might actually end up. I'm fascinated by Derrick Henry, first and foremost. Obviously, the Titans put the for sale sign on the franchise. They're looking to ship pieces away. They already did it with Kevin Byard. Derrick Henry is one of the obvious candidates to be moved. And Derrick Henry, for his career, has been as outlier a running back as you get in today's NFL in terms of most of the rules don't seem to apply to him, right? All the things we think we know about running backs don't seem to impact Derrick Henry. And that's relevant because, he's 29 years old. He's got a reasonably sizable contract attached to him. And these are things that would ordinarily make teams run for the hills and not want any part of this. But is Derrick Henry's history and the fact that he's always been an outlier going to make more teams interested in Derrick Henry than you would normally expect?
I think so. I think it has to, right? Like I, put out a video about some of my top candidates, and like you said, everyone's expecting the wheels to fall off. And even just looking at the last couple of years, he's still one of the elites at the position. But you mentioned the contract. He has a $10.5 million salary this year, the final year of his deal. I think Tennessee would have to eat a decent chunk, if not all of that. The trend we've kind of seen across the NFL now, where the incumbent team converts a bunch of the salary, makes it cheaper. They, in turn, do get a better draft pick, as a result. But I would imagine the teams that are calling there would ask Tennessee to do that. And maybe they are open to doing it and getting better draft capital, because that's really, I think what the key should be for them. Rather, save a couple $1 million is not as important as getting maybe, a third-round pick, whatever. I think the AFC North teams are the ones to watch here that we mentioned, just because there are so many injuries in Baltimore and Cleveland. It always helps when you have two competitive teams that are trying to beat each other, maybe in the market for the same player. We, of course, know about last year when the Chicago Bears beat out the Green Bay Packers for Chase Claypool's services. Obviously didn't go too great, but But yeah, so I would keep an eye on them. It just makes the most sense to me. And they certainly, both of those teams are top 5 in cash spending. They probably would need the conversion from the Tennessee side.
If that part is happening, the cash conversion, so that it becomes a relatively cheap deal for somebody to pick up, doesn't Buffalo scream like Derrick Henry? I mean, we saw like Derrick Henry could be what Latavius Murray was supposed to be in that game and wasn't able to be, right? Like a guy that's actually the power back, picking up tough yardage so that you don't have to run Josh Allen into the teeth of defenses the whole time. Like Derrick Henry, and lost in all this, right? Titans have a garbage offensive line. They're not good. Derrick Henry is still Derrick Henry. I mean, he's looked pretty damn good despite running behind a bad offensive line. I feel like you put Derrick Henry in any of these teams, he looks pretty awesome.
I think the one question with Buffalo is, and Henry, like, I think it's a pretty crazy story. Like when he was early on, not playing a ton, even though he was a second round pick, and they almost apparently traded him or moved on. And someone, a teammate, I forget who it was like, you got to give this guy like 20 plus carries and let him like work his way into a game.
Right.
And I think a lot of running backs say that. I know Dalvin said it yesterday. I'm not sure. I think that's the issue for him in New York right now, but with all due respect. But with Henry, I think it's true.
It has been. That's the thing.
Is Buffalo doing that an efficient approach to their offense is kind of my question.
Yeah, no, that's the crazy thing. It's like all the cliches that were always thrown about with running backs, you know, like you get stronger in the fourth quarter, you need to give him 25 touches, all this kind of stuff. Like statistically, it's crap for every running back in the NFL except Derrick Henry, where there actually is evidence to say the dude gets stronger in the fourth quarter. The more carries you give him, the harder he runs, the better production you get. Like all of the sort of crazy things, the rules that apply to running backs do not seem to apply to Derrick Henry. He is this weird, unique case. I think that's a fair point, though, that like I don't know if Buffalo is set up to give him the kind of workload that would best maximize him, whereas, you know, Baltimore or Cleveland certainly are better set up for that.
Yeah, no, that's the only point there. But yeah, I mean, you know, they did. Everyone kind of had their Windhorst, thing go on when they restructured a contract last week with Deion Dawkins. You know, I'm always the boring wet blanket. They had less than $1 million in cap space. They needed that just to operate, but maybe they do. Maybe they do. You know, big win last night, going into a mini bye. Maybe they make a move, but I also think for them, I mean, you're starting Josh Norman at corner now. Like, I think you probably have other positions you might want to address besides, you know, adding a running back. And James Cook's been better this year than last year.
Yeah, no, he's looked good. I want to pitch you, before we get on to the Washington edge rushers, I want to pitch you my idea, which I've been told is dumb by two separate people. I'm going to take a swing at you and basically see if I can find somebody that backs me up. The Carolina Panthers should trade for DeAndre Hopkins, because it's cheap, right? They paid him the money. He's getting paid nothing, essentially, for the rest of this year. They desperately need a number one wide receiver, any receiver that Bryce Young can have some confidence in. I think it makes everything better this year, and it doesn't mean it's irrelevant that it's not a long-term deal, because right now your single driving force, if you're Carolina, should be ensuring that Bryce Young does not get damaged by this year. And I feel like if I'm wrong and actually him playing badly this year has no relevance whatsoever in year 2, 3, 4, all it did is cost you like a mid-round draft pick. If I'm right and it's actually important that he doesn't sink and drown this year, then for the cost of a mid-round draft pick and nothing else, you potentially saved your franchise quarterback.
You found a supporter. Yeah, I don't think you're dumb at all. We got Who called you dumb? Steve?
Steve and Rick Spielman called me dumb.
Well, that's going to happen. That's bound to happen. Rick Spielman thinks a lot of people are dumb, and he was successful for a very long time, so he's built up the cachet to say that. But yeah, like I hear you. Where look, they obviously don't have a first round pick, and maybe don't want to give up if it's a fourth or less, then I say go for it. If I'm them, you can't give up a third. You're not going to get a second for DeAndre Hopkins, but. Right. But yeah, I mean, I do think building confidence in a young quarterback, you bring a guy who, played at Clemson in DeAndre Hopkins, so has connections to the Carolina area. Yeah, like you said, they already paid him about a $10 million signing bonus, so you're bringing in a near minimum contract, and then you figure out next year as you go forward. I don't hate the idea. It's not about contending. It's just about make sure Bryce Young goes into year 2 feeling good about himself. That's worth the fourth round pick in my mind.
Yeah, and not just that, but like being functional. If that allows Bryce Young to operate for the rest of this year, I think it's relevant. Like, I was pitching this idea in the offseason when you would have had to sign him for more money and yada yada, and Panthers fans were mad because they were like, look, he's old, he's not going to be good by the time Bryce Young's good. It's like, it's not about like them syncing up in their careers. It's about year 1 and 2 for Bryce Young. The guy needs to be able to function, and we've seen with the current setup, he can't really. Like, this is why I was talking about signing DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason, because I think he would let him be operational right now and have somewhere to go with the ball and at least maybe learn and develop in a bad situation. Without that, I don't know that he's developing at all, and potentially you're actually damaging him and harming his development by not letting him grow and get better and, operate during the course of the season. So maybe it was a better deal when you didn't have to give up a draft pick to make it happen in the offseason. But because the money's been paid and it's cheaper now than it was in the offseason, it's just costing you a draft pick instead. So either way, I still think it's a good deal. They should go do it.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Or maybe, explore a Cortland Sutton, different kind of player, but, a big body contested catch type guy that can, again, just build some trust, build some some faith in Bryce Young, and he's not, has 3 years left on his deal, and maybe you give up less draft capital there because it's not converted, you take on a bigger salary. But yeah, I mean, Carolina has been trading away picks and eating bad contracts for like 5 years, and it made absolutely zero sense from basically 2019 through this year. If you're ever going to do it, like, now would be the time when you're not just cycling through journeyman quarterbacks and you have a rookie contract guy. I don't hate it. You're not dumb. Sam.
Thank you. Sometimes it's just important to hear that. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the Washington duo, Montez Sweat and Chase Young. I saw a report saying teams have been calling about Sweat but not Young. Is that what you're also hearing, or are both of them essentially equally likely to get moved?
I think either one could get moved. I think that the report from Nikki Javala, who does great work, I think, for the Washington Post, was that only Sweat had received an actual offer, whereas Young, they probably had phone calls, but no offer had been made. I do know that offers have been made for Montez Sweat, and I don't know personally that offers have been made for Chase Young, so I guess I have heard the same. I think there are a handful of teams that probably would be interested in either player. It's interesting, right? So look at it. So Sweat obviously has been healthier, more durable throughout his career. I think has a higher floor. But Chase Young, I mean, inarguably has a higher ceiling. Is top 10 for us in pass rush win rate, pressure rate. Is now playing. It's not on a limited snap count. Like, we've been saying that forever. But when he's been playing 300 snaps a season, he's now getting a full workload and still looking dominant on a snap to snap basis. My estimation is Washington probably wants to get blown away with an offer here, but teams realize you don't really have leverage like we talked about. Like, why would I send you a first-round pick for either guy?
Right.
And I think that might be what holds up, either move getting done. And then again, if they beat Philly, probably don't do it. If they lose to Philly, maybe they're like, all right, let's just move a guy and get smart here.
Where do you think makes sense for either one of them to land?
I think Atlanta's interesting just because I think their edge rush group for us is bottom 5 in pressure rate and pass rush win rate right now, and their defense is awesome. And that's without having a consistent pass rush presence off the edge. You have the rookie contract quarterback. You have all your weapons are on rookie contracts as well. Good offensive line. That's, all I think on solid deals. So maybe they get in the mix there, win the division, once and for all and kind of, build some momentum going forward. Look, the Niners did not play well at all against Minnesota, could barely generate any pressure, and we know they love defensive line and are never afraid to make a move there. I think Chicago still could be in the mix here. Why not try to go out and get an edge rusher that, probably the worst unit on their team. Ngakoue is like the one guy who's gotten pressure. He's on a 1 year, expiring deal. So those teams make sense. Jacksonville, I still think makes sense. Baltimore, I guess, but yeah, Jacksonville and those other contenders that need pass rush, I think makes sense as well.
What about Detroit? Imagine Detroit with a viable alternative to Aiden Hutchinson rather than relying on Hutchinson being the only source of pressure, particularly if this is a team that does believe in themselves and thinks they're going to be playing deep into January, into February even. That's the kind of move that can move the needle, right? Like right now, if somebody shuts down Aiden Hutchinson, they don't have pass rush. If you bring in a Montez Sweat or a Chase Young for the other side, that's a different deal.
Oh, 100%. Great shout. And I think they would also fit in terms of, good run defender for Montez Sweat. Young's pretty good against the run too, but, solidify the entirety of that defensive line, which has fun pieces and good pieces. But like right now, it's Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson and then rotational players, right? So you bring another legit dude. I'll throw one more in too. The Houston Texans are 3-3 with an awesome rookie contract quarterback with an awesome Will Anderson Jr. And opposite of Will Anderson, there's nothing really to speak of on that defensive line. Maybe they are buyers and think they have something cooking there as well. Kind of like Detroit, like you said, that's really, we think we're close and this could push, propel us to higher heights.
Or even Houston aren't necessarily the we think we're close type of team, but once you've decided you're in a good spot of, hey, we got it right, we got the quarterback, we got the coach, we're in the right direction. At that point, there's value in just making sure you don't miss on the player that you got to bring in. So the next wave is all about, okay, we've the foundations are good, now let's start adding pieces. So you do that by the draft, but if you screw up one of those picks, you set yourself back, you take a step in the wrong direction or a sideways step at minimum. I think there's value in, instead of taking whatever this pick is and spending it on an edge rusher who now needs to be good, otherwise we screwed up, go give it for a guy who's already good, and now, all right, it's going to cost you a bit more, but you're still taking a step forward. You're not running the risk of taking a step backwards.
Yeah, and because the financial component, I know you meant cost more, for maybe a trade pick standpoint, but also you're going to have 3 cheap years at minimum of, your second and third overall pick. Now is the time to spend on other positions, spend a receiver, maybe make a move there. You obviously have, an offensive line that's all making money at this point. But yeah, no, I think it makes all the sense in the world to spend a bit more on this defense. I mean, D'Amico Ryans has shown he can make a whole lot and, out of the talent they have. So can Bobby Slowick on offense. Get him some high floor, like you said, kind of. There's never a sure thing, all right. That, but because you have good rookie contract players, I think you do have the ability to take some of those risks.
All right. Anybody else you think we need to talk about before we head over to Vic and the Boo Boo Breakdown?
What about the receivers? Who do you think needs a receiver most? Let's say of the contenders, not like a Bryce Young situation. Just who needs a boost, as a pass catcher?
I mean, obviously, Kansas City's receiving core hasn't been good, but the emergence of Rashee Rice, the fact that Travis Kelce is their number one guy anyway, I don't know that they need to make a move happen. If they're sort of on the other end of the phone call spectrum, right? If somebody phones them with an offer that is too good to turn down, maybe they make a move, but I don't know that they're actively phoning around trying to get a Jerry Jeudy or a Cortland Sutton or whoever. I don't know that they need to make that kind of move. Who else would be in that list? I still feel because of the injuries and the lack of consistency, Baltimore could do with a receiver. When they're all out there, all playing at their peak, it's a good group, but that's happened maybe 1 or 2 games so far this season. If them getting reinforcements, I certainly don't think would hurt. Who else would I definitely think is in need of a receiver? Honestly, there's not too many teams.
I would just throw in, I don't know if they're interested at all. It's early, but I'm starting to get worried about the long-term viability of Jameson Williams in Detroit and if he's actually going to be a thing or not. And Josh Reynolds is playing the best football of his career maybe right now. He's obviously got great chemistry with Jared Goff, but, and Sam Laporta is one of the best young tight ends we've ever seen. But if they don't have a lot of confidence in Williams, maybe they go out and get an outside receiver, a different skill set than the tight end and Amon-Ra. I don't know. Maybe it could make sense because it's just there's no consistency to speak of whatsoever there right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right to be at least starting to get concerned. I don't know if it's enough to make a move at this point. I think Khalif Raymond can do some of the things Jameson Williams can as well. So they've kind of got a backup plan in house, and I just think it's probably too soon to give up on him, which you would effectively be doing by bringing in someone else to do that skill set. So. True. I get the concern. I doubt it's enough to make them make a move at this point, but maybe I'm wrong.